Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. So for those, and people will sort of join in as we move along. So Deanna, start by just telling us a little bit about who you are, what your path has been, and how specifically you got into working in science and technology.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I've always loved science and math, but in all the way through junior high and high school, I was in drama and music, and really thought the arts was going to be my path. And then I was a single mom. I found myself a single mom in my early 20s, and decided to go into something that I knew there was going to be a high demand. And so I chose chemical engineering, and I chose chemical engineering at SAIT. And the year I graduated, the movie Erin Brockovich came out.
Oh, yes.
And it really felt like a call to action for me. My dad spent his entire career in oil and gas. I was really familiar with the industry. So it wasn't, out of the realm of possibility for me to pursue a career in that field. But it really was a call to action for the environmental side.
That's amazing. So because often people don't just choose to go into chemical engineering, right? Especially women. There's often a lot of challenges that people have to overcome. So was your dad sort of someone who always encouraged you? Like, did you have other people that you knew who did chemical engineering? Like, how was that?
Actually, no, I didn't. I was one of those folks that didn't really know what an engineer did. Like, I knew my dad was in oil and gas. He wasn't an engineer. So it really, to be honest, when I did my upgrading, they had binders. It was back before we had all the Google and searching careers on the internet. And they had binders, and I literally chose the shortest time in school with the highest demand, and that was chemical engineering. And then I prayed a little bit.
So you were very intelligent, obviously. That's great. So now you have this company, Indigenous Engineering Inclusion. That's the name of the company. Tell us about that. Like, how did you start your own? Did you start your own company right away? Did you do something else?
No, I worked in oil and gas for 20 years. And I saw that there was, as an Indigenous woman who's passionate about the environment, working in oil and gas and pipelines, I often felt that depending on the groups I was in, the conversations were very different and they weren't happening together. And I really felt like there was this need and opportunity for a bridge between different perspectives, because I believe ultimately we all want the same thing. And so we all want to do our best to preserve the planet for future generations. We all want to heat our homes. It's this balance. And so I started the company to help create that bridge. And then, so that was in 2016.
Amazing. And the term Indigeneer, is that something that you came up with? Like,
it was around 2008 when I went back to school to get my engineering degree. I went to Lakehead University. They had a unique transfer program for technologists. And I started speaking to youth about careers in engineering. In fact, it was part of a scholarship I applied for. That one of the requirements was to give a talk to a high school group. And I realized that when I was speaking to Indigenous youth, they often felt that it was an either or conversation. Like, either they went into a career like engineering and supported their family and that sort of thing, or they were for Mother Earth. And I had already spent 10 years in oil and gas focused on environmental compliance and sustainability. And I really wanted kids to understand that you didn't have to choose. And so I kind of joke tongue in cheek that I'm pretty sure that Brangelina was still together. And I thought, Indigenous engineer, Indigeneer, Brangelina, like.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And I know I'm totally dating myself with that.
No, not at all. What is that name called? There's like a term for like yeah, like Benifer
There
and
is, and I
we're having a bit of technical issue here, I think. Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
good.
it
I
just
lost you.
froze for a second.
Yeah, no, we're okay. So that's how it came about. And obviously it's resonated because you've kept using it, which is great.
Yeah, and then I decided to just write a definition for it. Like, it's combining Western scientific principles with Indigenous perspectives and respect for Mother Earth.
Love it. That's amazing. And so powerful when someone that those youth can relate to tells them
Yeah,
that
yeah. I
those two
think I
things
heard a
can be
quote
combined.
once, like, if you can see it, you can be it. Like, if
Yeah.
you can't see yourself reflected in someone, um, I try to really honestly share my whole journey. Like, it's not linear. It's not perfect, whatever that is. I was a teen mom. I didn't finish high school. I went back and then I kept going back. I'm actually doing a master's now.
Oh, good for you. That that is one of the most and it supported anecdotally in the work that Actua does across the country, but also the research shows it's so much more powerful for kids to actually hear the real journey, right? Because they can relate to that. They can relate to like, oh my gosh, okay, well I also, failed chemistry in high school. That doesn't mean the end of my pursuing of anything.
Right.
I also like really liked the arts, or I did like the challenges, the interests, like the human side of it is what I think we need to bring more into engineering and into the stories of like who are engineers, right?
Yes.
The real people who for the most part have taken quite like nonlinear paths. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. And your IndigeSTEAM program,
Mm-hmm.
we love, and I just want to hear more about it. Tell us, how tell us about it and how you
Yeah.
participate as well.
So IndigeSTEAM itself as an entity is relatively young, a couple of years, but it started out with a camp called Power to Choose, which was a program under the AWSN, the Alberta Women's Science Network. And so Power to Choose was a camp for Indigenous youth that started out for Indigenous girls. And the boys were like, well, we want to come too. So it's a camp that this year would have been our 10th year.
Oh,
It's quite sad because of COVID, we're not running our live camp, but it takes place at the University of Calgary and involves multiple faculties, and the kids get to stay in residence, so they get to experience what it's like to stay in a dorm. And for the first 8 years, it was high school. Sorry, it was grade 7 to 12. And last year we had our first younger group day
good.
camp, because the younger siblings would see their older siblings dropped off and be like, well, I want to go too.
That's so great.
And so we really focus on bringing in like it's STEM programming and STEAM programming, and but also bringing that cultural relevance. And we have elders that support the camp and that are there, and we also have sharing circles, and we also so it's that idea that we don't have to quote the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. I'm a board member of ASIS. One of the conferences I went to, they said, here you don't have to walk in two worlds, you can just be yourself.
Love it.
And so yeah, just really trying to create that space where youth don't feel like they have to fit a Western mold, that that Indigenous people have been scientists and innovators since time immemorial.
Absolutely. And that's a story that we try to tell across the country is, the best innovators in this country are Indigenous people, right? And there's so many examples, and it's it's a really important and misunderstood part of our country's history. So
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of messaging that comes from a good place, but is a little bit inaccurate, where youth are being told you're not in science right now. Like, we're so underrepresented in science. You're not here now, but you belong here. Like, but no, that's not the way I see it. Like, I want the youth to know that we've always been scientists.
Yes.
We
Exactly.
may not have a 4-year degree or a 2-year diploma. We may not have letters behind our name like PNG or CET, but that doesn't mean you can't be like, it's understanding the difference between Indigenous perspectives and knowledge and wisdom, as opposed to sort of the Western linear, you get these degrees, you get these letters, then you have knowledge.
That is it. I'm incredibly powerful for all of us, but I can imagine for the youth that are participating as well.
It's fun. And
so you use the word STEAM, and so we say STEM, STEAM, but the STEAM part is the arts part. You are an incredibly accomplished artist musically, right? A pianist, a vocalist, musical theater. You've done everything. So tell us from in your experience personally, as someone who obviously has excelled in the arts, why is that so important for us to be incorporating? Why is the STEAM part critical?
I think it's important to understand it in a multidimensional way. Like, understand science from, it's more than just formulas and answers, and it's when you incorporate the arts. And when I think of arts and STEAM, I think of arts and humanities and creativity. And so when you start incorporating the arts, you can start seeing science in a much deeper level. What is our relationship to science? What is our relationship to engineering? What is our role in this? It becomes a part of you. It's like it's like using music to learn math.
Yes.
Like, it's like looking at architecture, which is very, scientific and design oriented, and realizing that you're creating something that's beautiful. You're creating art. It's not separate.
Like, these earrings were made by one of our amazing partners, Paula. She's a high school principal, but she uses beading to teach math concepts to her kids, and has for years. It's
beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah, incredible. And
your earrings are beautiful.
Thank you. I know. I have so many pairs like that she's made, and she does the math, all of the math concepts, and that was for me how I first made that connection was at visiting a First Nation in New Brunswick way back when I was in university doing this, where a little girl said that her granny had told her that beading was math, explain the connection.
Oh.
It was really formative, but beautiful. I mean, it's just and so much more accessible to so many people. Right?
Oh yeah, and it's so important to reach kids. Science and math can be so sort of out there when you're younger, oh, science is hard, math is hard. Like, there's that sort of preconceived, we're taught in, oh, if you're smart, you'll be good at math. I think anybody can be good at math if they are taught to see it as math is everywhere.
Yes.
And so, for example, in our camp, we do a teepee workshop. So it's like the engineering of a teepee. But then we have an artist in residence who comes and helps the kids tell their story on their teepee. And then we do the chemistry of paint. And so the kids make their own paint based from blueberry powder and, different natural food products. So it's really a fully integrated workshop that the kids don't even realize that they're learning math and science.
So good. Oh, I love it. Well, I'm really sad that your 10th year, but next year can be your...
Yes. Yeah. We're looking right now, we're hoping to to shift and do some online
Oh, good.
programming, but it's just trying to figure out how to do that in a way that engages the youth. And so if we can get some funding, we'd like to make some of the kits where we can, put our TP kit together
That's
and
great.
mail it to the
Yes,
campers.
exactly.
Maybe it's just a workshop here and there, but
I think
like,
that's an amazing idea. That's great. So you're passionate about a lot of things. I mean, one of the things that you have been working on are the UN Sustainability Development Goals, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. What are some of the things that you're seeing right now that that make you feel optimistic? In the country. What are some examples that are happening along those lines, and why do you think it's so important that we're aware of those goals and continuing to pursue them?
yeah, I think I have a lot of hope lately. I've seen a huge. We're getting momentum, I think, across the country. I'm blessed to be involved with, as I mentioned earlier, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. There's a Canadian group that we've started, and I've seen in universities across Canada, engineering faculties are really asking themselves, where do we fit in the sustainability conversation? Where do we fit in the Sustainable Development Goals? And where do we fit in on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? And where do we as an engineering faculty and as engineers and engineering educators, where do we see ourselves in that conversation around reconciliation and the TRC calls to action? And I mean, my recent career change is an example of that, because I'm now a faculty member at the U of C. And I started there as their first Indigenous engineer in residence. And then in September, I joined the Faculty of Chemical and Petroleum Engineering full-time. And I'm now, I was appointed teaching chair focused on integrating Indigenous knowledge into engineering.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
it's really exciting. And this last semester, the winter semester, I had the opportunity to create a new course that was called Introduction to Environmental Engineering and Sustainable Development in Energy.
Wow.
And it was the first time that this course ran, and I integrated and did the conversation around Indigenous perspectives throughout the entire course.
Amazing.
And my students' final report, okay, I'm going to tell on myself now. I cried when I read every one of their essays, just to see the shift, and that their minds were so open to seeing things differently, and seeing the interconnectedness of Indigenous worldviews and sustainability, and that if we listened to the knowledge keepers, if we listened to the elders, we could make a difference around the world. We could make a global difference.
You could change a system. That's what I love about what you're doing. You can change the system by, think of those people who are the engineers of tomorrow, the next few years, who are going out with that whole, a different worldview, right?
Yeah.
A different
Yeah.
perspective, understanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Congratulations on doing that.
Thank you. It's just been an amazing journey that sort of organically, if you had told me 5 years ago that I would be teaching in engineering at U of C, and I'd be like, I never thought I'd go into academia, and now I'm doing graduate studies and working full-time there.
That's what's great about a non-linear path. You never imagine where you'll be. Well, I'm grateful that you're there, because I think you're going to be making a huge amount of change for a lot of people and industries, right? I mean, these are the people that are going out and into those industries where we need to have sustainability as one of the top areas of focus and priority. So
Yeah. And I think, well, I always felt that there was such a huge gap that
yeah.
engineers aren't taught about Indigenous rights. Engineers aren't taught about history or anything. And it's a huge gap in you spend 4 years doing some of the most difficult courses in the world. So if we have an entire course on engineering ethics, we should be having the conversation around Indigenous people and rights. And
Absolutely. All university students should have that course. And I've seen a lot of institutions in the last few weeks and months that are moving in that direction, and I think it's critical. Yeah. So Sunday is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and we know it's all month, and we've been highlighting and sharing stories from our Indigenous community partners, and for us, it's such a critical part of the work that we do, and we feel so privileged to work with communities across the country. What does that day for you? What's the kind of message that you have for youth or parents that might be watching about that day? About thinking ahead and being optimistic, maybe.
for me, it's a day, it's a month, it's an opportunity to really reflect and see the beauty of our culture, to feel proud, to like hold that love and pride in our heart of who we are. I'm a 60s scoop adoptee. So my journey to my roots and my culture and my family wasn't always easy. And, I've struggled with my own identity. And it's a day for me to just reflect and see how resilient and how far we've come against all odds. I want youth to know that they're beautiful and their brilliance is needed. And yes, we have intergenerational trauma, but we also have intergenerational wisdom in our DNA. And it's okay to acknowledge that while we're healing, while we're on this journey of finding ourselves and reconnecting.
That's an amazing message. I really appreciate that, and knowing that this conversation and the work is daily. It has to be daily. It's not just this month. It's not a day, but it's an ongoing. There's so much to benefit from by recognizing and celebrating how much science and innovation has been led by Indigenous people.
Yeah. It amazes me every day. Like every time I go somewhere new, I want to find out what the first peoples of that place brought. Whether it's the Mayans and whether it's bridges that were made out of natural fibers that were stronger than the largest steel bridges. Like, it's absolutely incredible.
Great. I'm so happy you're teaching. I think that's wonderful. And how lucky are those students to have you as a teacher? It's wonderful.
Thank you.
It's been so nice to talk to you. I am so happy that we had the chance, and I think your story is incredible, and I love the work that you're doing, and I want
Thank you.
to I would love to talk more about the camp that you're doing in the summer, to see if there's a way that we could work together or help, or even just learn from each other. I think that would be
wonderful. Yeah.
So this is the start.
Great.
A great way to
Well, it's wonderful to meet you. I just love Actua. I love what Actua does. we had a couple of folks from Actua come to our IndigeSTEAM retreat last April. We had a retreat for educators, parents, and basically coming together and talking about how we can best support Indigenous youth. And so it was wonderful to have folks from Actua there.
Great. Well, this is wonderful, and it'll continue beyond this live conversation. So thank you. Thanks for taking the time, and this is just the beginning of many conversations, I hope.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Deanna. Have a good day.
You
Take
too.
care. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.